Being busy feels productive for a reason. It gives you proof. Proof that you're trying. Proof that you're engaged. Proof that you're not wasting time. You answered emails. You attended meetings. You cleared notifications. You checked things off. From the outside, that looks responsible. From the inside, it feels reassuring. But here's the uncomfortable question. What actually changed? Did the direction become clearer? Did the priorities simplify? Did the real constraint move? Or did you just reduce surface noise? Most people don't chase productivity. They chase relief. When work feels unclear, overwhelming, or vaguely threatening, being busy gives you something solid to hold onto. A task list. A reply sent. A document updated. Activity replaces ambiguity. And ambiguity is what most knowledge work is made of. The hardest part of modern work is not doing things. It's deciding which things matter. And deciding what matters requires trade-offs. Trade-offs require commitment. Commitment means living with the possibility that you chose wrong. Busyness postpones that risk. As long as you are busy, you don't have to decide what truly deserves your attention. You can respond instead of choose. You can react instead of commit. You can stay in motion instead of define direction. Motion feels safe. Stillness does not. Notice how uncomfortable it feels to sit in front of an empty page. No notifications. No incoming requests. No urgent task. Just space. That space forces a question. What should I actually be doing? And that question is heavier than any inbox. So most people prefer the inbox. The inbox tells you what to do next. It gives you instructions. Respond here. Fix this. Approve that. There is relief in being told. But direction rarely comes from being told. Direction comes from deciding. And deciding means narrowing. When you decide that one thing matters most, you implicitly declare that other things matter less. That creates tension. Busyness avoids tension. You can give a little attention to everything. You can feel useful everywhere. You can avoid the discomfort of exclusion. But spreading attention thin is not the same as making progress. In fact, it often guarantees stagnation. You move many pieces, but none far enough to matter. Modern work environments reward busyness. They measure responsiveness. They reward speed. They highlight visible effort. Few systems reward clarity. Because clarity is invisible until much later. Thinking looks like inactivity. Saying no looks like disengagement. Pausing looks like weakness. So people optimize for what gets noticed. Quick replies. Full calendars. Rapid updates. But none of these necessarily reduce uncertainty. And uncertainty is the real friction in knowledge work. If you don't know what you're optimizing for, no amount of activity will compensate. This is why people can end a day exhausted and still feel behind. They did many things. But they didn't reduce confusion. Busyness is excellent at managing tasks. It is terrible at managing direction. And direction is what actually compounds. Imagine two people. One spends their day responding to everything. The other spends an hour deciding what truly matters and then works on only that. The first person looks busier. The second person makes more progress. Because progress comes from alignment, not volume. Being busy gives you something else, too. It gives you a narrative. I worked hard today. I stayed on top of everything. I handled what came in. Hard work is admirable. But hard work without alignment is just expensive. You can invest enormous energy into things that do not move the core problem. And busyness makes that invisible. Productivity tools amplify this illusion. They quantify activity, tasks completed, messages sent, projects updated. Numbers create certainty. If you completed 20 tasks, that must mean something. But what if none of those tasks addressed the central issue? Completion does not equal consequence. A perfectly organized to-do list can still represent scattered thinking. Structure can store effort. It cannot create meaning. This is why people often rebuild systems repeatedly. When the outcome feels unsatisfying, they assume the structure was wrong. So they reorganize. They migrate. They optimize. And during optimization, they feel productive again. Because building systems feels strategic. But preparation is not the same as commitment. Preparation says, I'm getting ready. Commitment says, I've chosen. And commitment carries risk. You can optimize forever without choosing. Busyness is socially validated avoidance. No one criticizes someone for being busy. Busy people are respected. Busy people are important. Busy people are in demand. But being in demand is not the same as being directed. There is a difference between demand and purpose. Demand is external. Purpose is internal. Busyness responds to demand. Productivity aligns with purpose. That alignment is quiet. It often requires saying no to things that look impressive. It often requires ignoring requests that feel urgent but unimportant. That is uncomfortable. Because urgency feels like importance. But urgency is often just proximity. The thing closest to you feels most real. Notifications are designed that way. They arrive loudly. They interrupt. They demand acknowledgement. But the most important work rarely interrupts you. It waits. It requires initiation. And initiation requires clarity. Here's a deeper problem. Many people don't actually know what their most important work is. Not clearly. They have vague ambitions, general goals, broad responsibilities, but not a precise definition of success. Without that precision, busyness fills the gap. If you don't know what success looks like, you settle for motion. Motion becomes a proxy for progress. And because motion is easier to generate than clarity, it dominates. This is why slowing down feels threatening. When you slow down, you remove the buffer. You're left with directionless space. That space asks uncomfortable questions. What am I avoiding? What decision have I postponed? What outcome am I actually trying to create? These questions don't have instant answers. They require thought. They require context. They require confronting constraints. Most meaningful progress begins with constraint. You cannot do everything. You cannot prioritize everything. You cannot respond to everything and still think deeply. Clarity emerges when constraints are accepted. Busyness emerges when constraints are ignored. The more you try to accommodate everything, the more your energy fragments. Fragmented energy feels like effort. It rarely feels like momentum. Momentum is directional. Effort can be random. Many people confuse intensity with direction. Working intensely does not guarantee working wisely. You can apply enormous force in the wrong direction. And busyness makes that feel noble. Because it looks like dedication. But dedication to what? If you ask most people what their top priority is, the answer is often abstract. Growth, impact, success, improvement, but abstraction does not guide daily decisions. Specificity does. Without specificity, every incoming task competes equally. And when everything competes equally, you default to urgency. Urgency feels like clarity. It is not. Urgency is simply loud. Clarity is often quiet. This is why real productivity often looks slower. It involves fewer tasks, more deliberate choices, more empty space. Empty space is not laziness. It is capacity. Capacity to think, to decide, to reflect. Busyness eliminates capacity. It fills every gap. And once gaps are filled, there is no room for correction. You continue in motion even if the direction is wrong. People who appear calm in high-pressure environments are not less engaged. They are more decided. They know what not to react to. They understand which fires can burn unattended. That confidence does not come from tools. It comes from clarity. Clarity reduces noise. Busyness amplifies it. There is nothing wrong with being active. Execution-heavy work requires speed. Some roles demand responsiveness. But even in those roles, direction must exist somewhere. If all you ever do is react, you inherit other people's priorities. And inherited priorities rarely align perfectly with your own goals. Eventually, fatigue sets in. Not from working too much, but from working without coherence. Coherence reduces cognitive load. Busyness increases it. You don't feel tired because you did a lot. You feel tired because you didn't know which parts truly mattered. And uncertainty is exhausting. Real productivity is not about doing more. It is about reducing what needs to be done. That reduction only happens when decisions are made clearly. When trade-offs are explicit. When constraints are accepted. Being busy feels productive because it postpones those steps. It keeps you moving so you don't have to choose. But progress begins when you choose anyway. When you accept that some things will be neglected. When you accept that not all opportunities deserve pursuit. When you accept that clarity is heavier than chaos. Busyness is easier in the short term. Clarity is more powerful in the long term. One feels active. The other creates direction. If you feel constantly busy but rarely satisfied, the problem may not be effort. It may be avoidance. Not conscious avoidance. Subtle avoidance. Avoidance of defining success clearly enough to say no confidently. Avoidance of committing to fewer things. Avoidance of accepting that some doors must close for others to open. Being busy feels productive because it protects you from these realizations. But once you see the pattern, the illusion weakens. You begin to notice when activity is replacing decision. When responsiveness is replacing reflection. When structure is replacing clarity. And once you notice, you have a choice. Continue moving. Or pause long enough to decide where you're actually going. Real productivity begins not when you move faster, but when you move deliberately. And deliberate movement always starts with clarity. Not busyness.